Welcome, everyone. We're just going to wait until everybody has signed in, so make yourself comfortable. So nice to see everybody's faces. Nice to see lots of people joining us. So I think there is a desire to travel because there's lots of you that have come on to join us tonight. So thank you. Well, welcome everybody to our Thursday night Expedia Travel Talk. Tonight we have a very special guest, Goway Travel, focusing on Africa tours and safari adventures. For those of you who are on the call that have maybe not attended a Zoom meeting, everyone is muted. You do have control of your video. We'd love to see your faces. It's been a long time since we're not really socializing. So if you feel comfortable, please turn your cameras on. If you have any questions, we do have a chat feature and we will be answering the questions after the presentation. So my name is Lisa Anflick. I'm one of the consultants at Expedia Cruises, and tonight's travel talk is being hosted by the 6 Expedia Cruises stores in Edmonton and vicinity. And we started doing these travel talks when COVID hit back in March, because even though we couldn't travel, we knew the desire to travel was still there and the curiosity of what was happening in the travel business. We are coming up to 16 months since travel shut down. And if you are on this call, you probably love to travel. Travel fulfills us. That's why we do it. And if you're like me, I'm sure you're missing it. Lots of good news on the forefront in terms of vaccine rollouts, in terms of hotel quarantine. They're talking about lifting that as well as the borders. So I don't think it's going to be much longer till our world opens up. And you may not feel comfortable traveling right now, and that's perfectly fine. But I can tell you there's always the desire to plan, and there's never a bad time to plan. Studies have shown that approximately 40% of the pleasure of a trip just comes from planning it. Last year has been very, very challenging. And sometimes what got me through the days was thinking of where I wanted to go next. So sometimes I think of a sunny beach in Florida. Sometimes I think of going to maybe Barcelona or London or Paris and seeing some of the beautiful icons and churches and cathedrals. And other times I think of something exotic. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited about tonight, because we're going to take you over to Africa. Now more than ever, the need of a professional consultant is desired. Travel will be a little bit different, and we are here to help you plan your travel so it's seamless. We are committed to finding you the best value for your cruise dollars, and we are more than just cruises. We can help you plan your entire vacation. We are Expedia Cruises air, land, and sea vacation. So whether it's your flights, your cruise, your hotel, your tours, your safari, your transfers, etc., we can help you. And one of the things that I think it's really important nowadays with the economy is to shop local. And we are in your local areas. So we are committed. Our consultants are active, they're learning, they're doing the research they need to do to make sure that when we plan a vacation for you, it will be seamless. So now I'm going to take the opportunity to introduce our special guest, Renee Stanton-DeFaria, who's coming to us from her home in Kelowna. Renee is the General Manager of Sales from Goway Travel, and she is going to give us an eye-opening event into Africa and safari. So welcome, Renee.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for having me this evening, and good evening, everyone. So I'm just going to share my screen. Bear with me for 2 seconds, just make sure that it is all working okay. Now, do I need to swap that around, or are we on the right screen, Lisa? We're good. Excellent. So thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. I'm delighted to present on South Africa. I will touch a little bit on Africa, but as it is a continent and we do service actually 24 different countries throughout Africa, as I do only have about half an hour this evening, I decided to focus on our #1 destination, which is South Africa, just because it offers so many different experiences. Obviously, the safaris, but also some amazing wineries, coastal scenery, and you'll see what I mean in a minute. So these are the 24 countries that Goway currently services throughout Africa. A new country that we've just introduced this year is Ghana. Now, in regards to the types of travel that we can offer, we are known for our tailor-made itineraries. So basically what that means is we can handcraft a bespoke itinerary just for you. So we customize it to your budget, your requirements, your duration, and we can put everything together. We also do luxury rail journeys, and these are quite popular in Africa. One in particular is Rovers Rail. Now, this particular train actually becomes a part of the journey and your accommodation. You have a beautifully appointed room on board, fantastic cuisine, and it takes you throughout South Africa. We also do culture and history tours, in particular more in Northern Africa. Obviously, we've got Egypt, Morocco, and things like that. We do beach extensions. So if you are wanting to do a beach extension, we can certainly do that on one of your African trips. We do safaris. Obviously, that is one of the biggest ticket items when it comes to Africa. And right now I'm in Sabi Sabi, which is a lodge, a beautiful luxury lodge in South Africa. I wish I was in Sabi Sabi, but this is what one of the rooms looks like. We also have a Stays of Distinction program, which I will touch on a little bit more on the next slide. We also do privately guided tours and gorilla and chimp trekking. Now, what's a Stays of Distinction? A Stays of Distinction is not only luxurious accommodation, but it also has to offer something unique whilst you're there. So we have these Stays of Distinction properties throughout the whole of Africa, but I just wanted to give you one example of one we do in South Africa, which is Lion Sands. So at this particular lodge, you usually stay in that room in the bottom right-hand corner. So as you can see, that's what the normal appointed room looks like. But what you can do whilst you stay there is go and stay in a tree house, which is quite unique in itself. Don't worry, completely safe, but you get to sleep underneath the stars, listen to the animals at night. And that's a one-night experience. So I wanted to show you this because one thing I try and recommend with all of our itineraries is, regardless of budget, if you can include at least one stay of distinction in your program, you really will come home with some incredible stories to tell. We also do unique experiences throughout Africa. Now, this is probably the most popular unique experience, and it's Giraffe Nana. Now, this is not in South Africa. It's actually in Nairobi in Kenya. But if you are wanting to do something like this, you have to book at least a year in advance. It's extremely popular. In fact, it is the most Instagram hotel in the world. So there's a fun fact for you. And I think you can see why. It's a 12-acre private land, and the giraffes are allowed to just roam freely. And yes, they do come and join you for breakfast. Now, before I get into South Africa and take you around on a recent tour that I did, my pre-COVID trip, I wanted to give you a couple of important tips when planning your holiday. The first thing is expectations. So think about how you want to travel. Do you want it to be deluxe, first class, moderate? Think about the budget, because what we can then do is maximize that budget for you. Book early. Now, this is really important when it comes to Africa. In particular, the safari lodges. They book out well in advance. And if you think about it, you're actually now nearly 2 years or 18 months of travel that hasn't happened. So a lot of those people have rolled their journeys over to 2021 or 2022. So availability is becoming scarce. So one thing I can't stress enough is, as Lisa mentioned, the importance of booking very soon if you can. Deposit and permits. Now, in Africa, you naturally at Goway, we do have a deposit, but you'll also find a lot of the luxury trains and the lodges and so forth also have deposits. In fact, sometimes it's about 75% of the total booking value. So it's just something to keep in mind when budgeting. Now, think about your primary focus. Why do you want to go to Africa? Is it because of the game? If it is, maybe then you'd want to go to East Africa. But if you're wanting experience that's more of a combination, perhaps wineries, you're wanting to see some coastline and you're still wanting to see game, plus the cities, then South Africa is a perfect choice. Now, enough time is really important as well. I personally went and I spent 2 weeks there. And for me, that was the perfect amount of time. I wasn't too rushed, but I also felt If I did less than that, I might have missed out on some of the unique things that I did. And when is the best time to go? Well, once again, it really depends on what you're going for. The migration season is all year round. So we can actually find out when you want to travel and then tell you where and what parts of Africa you would need to see if you wanted to see the migration at that particular time. Now it's time to take you to South Africa. And this is where we're going to start our journey today in Cape Town. So what I did back in 2019 is I did a trip that started at Cape Town and ended in Johannesburg. Now, some people choose to do that in the reverse, and the reason being is time zones. So you'll fly from obviously North America over to South Africa. Depending on where you stop, that could take you about 19 hours, 20 hours or so to get there. And then obviously you've got the time zones as well. Now, when you're on safari, you typically wake up at about 4:30 or 5:30 in the morning, just depending on when you travel. And so some people like to start in Johannesburg and do the game drive then because you're not quite acclimatized to the time yet, so you might be waking up early anyway. But for me, I decided to start in Cape Town because I really wanted to end it with the best, the safari. So that's the journey that I'm going to take you on this evening. Now, people always ask, when is the best time to travel? And usually we do have a best time to travel for you. But the truth is, South Africa is an all year round destination. And you'll see by these different temperatures throughout that it really stays warm throughout the year. Now, obviously being the Southern Hemisphere, it's the complete opposite to here in Canada. However, if you're wanting to go in December and March, it's fantastic for Cape Town and the wineries because it's obviously going to be warmer. However, it's going to be wet season when you're going on your safaris. But that can be good because the wet season can mean that there's more animals at the watering holes and things like that. Where if you flip it and go in the winter, which is actually peak season for the safaris, then it's going to be cooler down on the coast. And as you can see, it gets down to about 7 degrees, not quite what you experience in Edmonton, but still much cooler for South Africa. And then it's obviously going to be drier. So when I ask people when their favorite time is, I've asked my Vice President of Africa, who is South African herself. She actually recommends the spring because she loves it then because it's not as crowded and all the babies are being born. So who is visiting South Africa? Well, simple answer is pretty much everyone. You've got the adventurous, the baby boomers, the honeymooners. My trip personally was for my honeymoon, and I am so glad that I chose South Africa as my honeymoon. The millennials, you name it, culinary people, and it's also wonderful for families. Now, when you think of South Africa, it would be remiss of me not to mention the Big Five. Now, I'm not sure if you remember or you even know what the Big Five are, but they are the African elephant, the black rhino, the Cape buffalo, the African lion, and the African leopard. This is what South Africa is known for. And it's actually a thing in South Africa if you can do the Big Five drive. And what that means is in one safari drive, you get to see all 5 animals. Now, I was fortunate enough on my 3rd drive, I managed to see all 5. The hardest out of those ones is definitely the cheetah. The leopard, not the cheetah, but I did manage to see one in a tree, exactly like this. Another thing you might not know is they also have the marine Big Five. So in regards to that, you've got the African pelican, the fur seal, the dolphin, the whale, and the great white shark. So let's start our tour in Cape Town. So this is a pretty famous picture. It's a Table Mountain here, and there really is truly spectacular views when you get there. Now, you can opt to do 2 ways. You can either hike up, and if you're fairly fit, it'll take you about 3 hours or so. Or you can do what I did, and you can take the cable cart out. When you're up there, you'll probably spend at least a couple of hours just walking around, looking at all the different sites. Now, it is weather permitting. Sometimes the clouds do cover it. Now, I stayed in Cape Town for 3 nights, and that's typically what we recommend for our clients to do. So one of the days it was a little bit overcast. However, the next day it completely cleared up. So you may need just a little bit of flexibility with your itinerary in regards to Table Mountain. Now, this is the V&A waterfront, and it's a very famous, iconic area in Cape Town. This is typically where a lot of our clients will stay as well, because there's some lovely accommodation. There's actually 24 million tourists per year that come here to the V&A waterfront. It's got lots of different accommodation, restaurants, shops, fun activities for the family. It really is a lively place. Now, I can tell you, when I went here and experienced my first dinner, I ordered a glass of wine. Well, what I thought was a glass of wine. It ended up being a bottle of wine, and that was because the price of the wine was so cheap. I think it was about $8, so I assumed it was a glass, but it was actually a bottle. So the other thing that's fantastic about South Africa is the exchange rate. So at present, it is very, very favorable to the Canadian dollar. So when you get there, it is a lot cheaper than what we experience here in Canada, especially when you go out eating, and wine is really, really cheap as well. I do love my wine. So I was quite happy at $8 a bottle. So once we go from V&A waterfront, we can then take a boat out to Robben Island. Now, I'm sure you're familiar with Robben Island. It really is a major highlight. From 1961, it was used by the South African government as a prison for political prisoners and convicted criminals. Of course, Nelson Mandela was prisoned there for 27 years. Now, I can tell you it is well worth its visit. The actual tour guides themselves were previous inmates, and these are personal photos of mine. I've tried to include a lot of personal photos in here as well. So in the left-hand corner, that's actually Nelson Mandela's cell where he spent 27 years. And this was our guide, who was a political prison inmate, so he was there for political reasons. And it was really interesting to see his encounter of living there, or being jailed there, I guess you could say. And this is a famous picture that everyone gets of Robben Island. It's about 7 kilometres from Cape Town, so you can see Table Mountain there in the background. So you usually spend a good half day out here at Robben Island. Now I'm going to take you on a Cape Peninsula tour. So this is a full day tour that we do from Cape Town, and it's beautiful. It really shows you the stunning landscape that's in South Africa. So here you start with a scenic drive along the Atlantic coast. You pass through the cosmopolitan suburbs of Sea Point, Camps Bay, to Hout Bay, one of Cape Town's best kept secrets. Then when you're out at Hout Bay, you go out on a very short boat trip to Dunker Island. And this is where you'll view one of the big 5, the Cape seals, the big marine 5, I shall say. It's an island inhabited only by these seals. And once again, these are all personal pictures of mine, so you can see the seals, and you really get up and close and personal with them. After experiencing the seals, then you come back on the boat to land, and then we drive you out to Boulder Island. And this is where you'll see the penguins, the African penguins. And there is so many. They're absolutely adorable. I had a selfie with one, so you can get some great photos out there as well. Following this, we'll then take you to Cape Point. Now, Cape Point is the southeast corner of Cape Peninsula. This is basically where east and south meet. So when you are there, there's a beautiful lighthouse. You can actually take a funicular up to the top, or you can hike around there. It really is a spectacular area, because you can just see from the pictures how dramatic the landscape is and the cliffs are. It's roughly about 30 kilometres or so from 60 kilometres or so from Cape Town. Beautiful rolling hills. There's a restaurant out there. So it's a lovely little area to do a nice walk. Now, ending the tour, we go to Kirstenbosch National Botanical Gardens. Now, these National Botanical Gardens are actually claimed to be one of the greatest in the world. Reason being is no garden really can match the sheer grandeur of this setting. And I think you can see it here, these ladies walking through the botanical gardens. It really is very serene, extremely beautiful. And it's a nice place to sit and relax and unwind after this full day that you've had in Cape Town. So now we're leaving Cape Town, and I'm going to take you on what's known as the garden route. Now, I personally opted in to do a self-drive vacation. Now, just to let you know, they do drive on the left-hand side in South Africa. Lucky little Miss Australian here is used to driving on the left-hand side. However, my husband is Canadian, and he was completely fine driving on the other side. The roads are all paved. The signage is in English. And we also felt very safe along the way. It's usually a 2-lane freeway, nothing like what you experience over here. And look, you live in Edmonton, so I'm sure you're used to some, snowy and icy conditions. So you'll probably find this a piece of cake driving over there. So with the Ghana route, there's a couple of routes you can take. So you can see on the map here, we started in Cape Town and then we ended up in Port Elizabeth, which is at the very end of the map. Now you can take the coastal scenery or you can do an alternative route which takes you past an ostrich farm. But let's start at the very beginning, off to wine region. So approximately 45 minutes away from Cape Town, you will reach Stellenbosch. Following that, we're going to go to Franschhoek. Now, I have been to many wineries around the world, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, South Africa, South America, but hands down, I think that this is the best scenery I have ever seen with wineries, these mountains that are around you. And the South African wine, I'm sure if you haven't tried it before, make sure you go get yourself a bottle. They really do exquisite wine over there. Now, not only does it have the wines there, but it also has lovely little art galleries. It's very quaint and very beautiful. A lot of festivals throughout the year. This is an image of me enjoying a lovely glass of bubbles. I did an 8-course degustation meal there at one of their top restaurants, and I believe it was only about $120 a head for 8 courses with wine, just to give you an idea of the price point. But I can highly recommend maybe a night in Stellenbosch and then a night in Franschhoek if you have the time permitting. Now, if you don't have the time to do the full drive, which I'm about to take you on, definitely at least do a day visit because it is only an hour from Cape Town. So we've done the wine, we've seen some amazing art galleries and enjoyed this very quaint village. Now we're going to move down south to Hermanus. Now, this is such a beautiful place. In fact, it's sometimes termed as heaven on earth because here it's sitting on the edge of Walker Bay. It's a small coastal town and it really is breathtaking scenery. So you've got this beautiful coastline and these lush green mountains around you. Now, Hermanus is very famous for the whales. So you have the whale migration season throughout the winter. Unfortunately, I just missed out on the whale migration season. But that's okay. This town in itself is just really beautiful. Now, in the bottom left, in the bottom 2 corners, that was one of the hotels that I stayed at. It is the Marine Hotel. Fun fact, that's where Brad Pitt stayed when he was in Hermanus. And that's the type of room that you have. So it's like an old colonial, beautiful resort right on the ocean. But there's many different varieties of hotels there, and it's a great place to overnight. And if you can combine it with the whale migration season, then I'd highly recommend it. Now, this was my next day. I went and saw the great whites. Now, this was something my husband absolutely insisted that we had to do. So it was his birthday present from me. I was a little bit hesitant. So the guide said, I'm still going to take out a wetsuit and everything for you. And I said, no way. I am staying on this boat. I'm Australian. I know about these great white sharks. I am not hopping in the water. Well, you got me out there an hour later and I was in the water pretty much quicker than anyone. It was quite an incredible experience. Now, if you don't want to go in the cages, then by all means, that's fine. I would still recommend just being on the boat itself. This is a picture I took with just my camera phone. So that shows you what you can see from the boat. So that's not in water. That's me just above taking the photo. So even on the boat, you'd see the great whites. We saw 7 different great whites. And yes, that's my husband in the cage. And you just wear snorkeling gear on this one. It's not scuba diving. And it was very cool. So I'm so happy that I did this experience. And you can do this at Mussel Bay. It's a few hours from Hermanus, and it's also a fantastic area to overnight. It really has an abundance of sea life. So obviously you've got the great whites there, but you've also got seals, fish. Once again, it's a lovely little coastal harbour town. So that's where we opted to stay the evening. Now, if you took that alternate route and you went slightly different, we didn't go here to Altschorn. I probably pronounced that incorrectly, but it is known as the feather capital of the world because it is a huge ostrich industry. So here you can go and visit an ostrich farm. You might even be game enough to hop on an ostrich and see them racing or have a go at it. So this is very popular for people to do if you wanted to do that alternative route and go out and do an ostrich farm. After that, you go back down and to a place known as Neisner. Now, this is the jewel of the garden route, and it is a gorgeous little area. It has a beautiful lagoon surrounding it and ancient forests, and it's probably the most famous town on the garden route itself. It formerly was a center of the timber industry, actually. So you'll see a lot of woodwork and traditional furniture there that you can purchase. But there's also, once again, a harbour town. So you've got little restaurants. We had a fantastic seafood meal there when we stayed the evening. So once again, it was really lovely to stay in these quaint little villages along the way. And you can see just in that top left-hand corner, that was what the drive was the majority of the way. So there wasn't one moment where I wasn't looking up and around me thinking, wow, this really is truly spectacular. So last but not least, the end of the garden route for me was in Port Elizabeth. Now, the great thing about Port Elizabeth is not only is it a great coastal town, it has fantastic beaches, you've got a great boardwalk with lots of fun things to do. But about an hour's away from Port Elizabeth coastal area, you actually have some game drives. So if you don't have time permitting where you're going to now fly up, which is what we're about to do, to go to Kruger National Park, you can actually see the Big Five only about an hour away, and here's some images of one of the private game lodges there. So here you can actually do all your water things in the day, and then you could even head to safari, which is pretty cool. So it's a lovely little area. And here the next morning, we departed for our flight off to Kruger. Now, Kruger National Park is one of the most famous national parks in the world. It's 19,500 square kilometres. It's actually the size of Israel. I learned that fact today and I was quite blown away. It does house some of the highest density of African animals, I should say, in the world. You do have your Big Five there, but you also have hundreds of animals, hundreds of other mammals, an amazing diverse bird species. So if you've got any birding people on here, amazing birds. You have vultures, eagles, and storks. Also just the mountains and the bush plains and the tropical forest. So obviously the Serengeti and places like that, you can see for miles ahead of you. But in places like Kruger, you've got beautiful mountains around you. So here's a quick look at Kruger National Park and the different game lodges that we can service. Now, a lot of these are private game lodges. Now, one of the advantages of doing a private game lodge, rather than you personally self-driving Kruger, is that you get these open-air vehicles and the chances of seeing wildlife are much higher. And the reason I say that is because if you self-drive Kruger, you can only imagine how many people are doing it at the same time. So if a lion is suddenly seen, there might be 30 cars that are all pulling in to try and see this lion. Whereas if you're in a private game lodge, there's maximum maybe 2 or 3 vehicles at one time allowed to be there when the animals are there. So you really get a much more authentic, unique experience. Now, for the sake of this tour tonight, I'm actually going to take you to Kapama, which in the image here, you can see Hoedspruit Airport in the top left-hand corner. That is where I flew directly from Port Elizabeth. Now, the wonderful thing about this is Kapama's across the road from the airport. Now, it is a private game lodge, so it's thousands of hectares. But as soon as I arrived to the airport, I hopped in one of those open-air vehicles and my game drive started. So basically, my arrival transfer felt like a game drive and I started to see my animals straight away. Now, this is an image of the room that I stayed in Kapama, but there's actually 4 different resorts on the property. So it just depends what type of style that you're after. This one here had a beautiful plunge pool. Another one is a little bit more rustic. And this is what the foyer looked like, the reception area. So really, Africa knows how to do luxury. It really blew me away when I got to stay at these lodges. Now, I'm going to take you on a safari, which is by far the highlight for me. So a typical safari starts at about 4:30 to 5:30 in the morning. You will wake up, you'll go have a cup of tea and coffee, maybe a biscuit, a muffin, just something very light. Now, I always recommend taking layers. So you can see me in this image. This is in the morning. I've got a scarf and a jacket on. By the end of the safari, I'm just in a t-shirt. So we always recommend layering because the morning it can be quite cool and it can be extremely hot during the day. So then you'll go out in one of these open air vehicles, and this is the ones that Kapama use, and a lot of the other private lodges use something very similar. So it's got that open air, you really feel a part of it. So you go out on your safari experience. It's going to be a few hours long, and then afterwards you return back to your lodge, and then you have a lovely late breakfast brunch experience. You're quite hungry by then, but you're also just taken back by what you've just seen. You then spend the daytime to use the facilities of the resort. So maybe you'll go and relax around the pool, you'll read a book, maybe you'll have a little sleep because you did get up early. Or maybe you're like me and you want to go get yourself a massage. So the daytime really is about you to relax and unwind, and all of these lodges really do have incredible facilities. And then in the afternoon, you're back out on one of those drives. Now, the reason they do the morning and the afternoon is because that's when animals are going to be their most active. So during the day is typically when they sleep, and also it can be incredibly warm in the middle of the day. So you head back out in the afternoon. Now, these are pictures I took with my camera, and I can tell you a couple of things. One, I'm certainly not a photographer. Two, I didn't have a very good lens on my camera at all. So I think from that alone, and this was 3 years ago when I went. So when you look at these particular pictures, it really shows you how close we got to those animals. Like, I really wasn't using a zoom here. So I didn't want to use professional photos because I didn't want to sell you something that, you know, the particular animal was yards away. But this is how close we got to these particular animals. And this is one of my favorite experiences, was when I saw my first lion. Oh my goodness me. It was absolutely incredible. I saw a male and a female together. I saw a pride together, and that's my husband taking the photo. And you can just see how close we actually are to the lion. Now, we were also fortunate enough to go up and see a family of cheetahs. Now, you can see we're standing up. We actually got to hop off the vehicle with our guide. He did have a rifle, and they always have one on you. So you have a guide as well as a driver at all times. And they both hopped off the vehicle and they walked us to this family of cheetahs. And that's them in the background in that picture. So quite amazing how close we got to them. Now, never at any stage did I ever feel unsafe. They really do educate you and really do make you have a sense of safety. Now, after that, you then do sundowners. So sundowners happens in the time that the sun is setting. They actually set up a beautiful bar with some drinks and some canapes, and you sit and you watch the sunset. Now, what a lovely way to end the day. So yes, this is me enjoying my lovely glass of wine, enjoying some of the food there as we watch the sunset. And till this day, one of the most incredible sunsets I've ever seen. After that, you do hop back on, and you're doing a bit of a night safari now. So this is an image of a torch. Like, actually, it's the headlights of the vehicle, and you can see a lion there. So once again, taking it with a pretty bad camera here. So with the real eye, you can see things a lot better than that. But it was really cool to see some different animals actually came to life at nighttime that I didn't see on the morning drive. Then we end the day. We go back to the lodge, and an incredible gourmet meal was cooked. And the great thing is, every single night they did something different. It was a different setting. And we actually spent 3 days out there. So we usually recommend 2 to 3 nights if you can out there. And that way you're going to get 2 game drives per day, just depending when you arrive in. And so you should definitely see the big 5. And we saw wildebeest, I should say, fight. And just some incredible things that we saw when we were there. Now, I just wanted to mention, because some people do ask me about families and is there any, age restrictions to do safari? And there's actually not. In fact, we do have many resorts that cater specifically to families. So if you do have any young ones that do want to come with you, by all means, they can. They do have certain age restrictions in regards to safari vehicles if you're with other people. So for argument's sake, if their age restriction is 12 and you have a 10-year-old, then all they do is they give you your own private vehicle. So regardless of the age, we'll always be able to accommodate. And in fact, a lot of them welcome children. They have some great programs for them where they can educate them, some arts and crafts. So if anyone here wants maybe some little ones to come, that's no problem whatsoever. So now I'm going to end my journey in Johannesburg. So we flew from Kruger over to Joburg, and we only spent one night there. But we do recommend at least one night there if you can, if you have time permitting. A lot of people don't see Johannesburg, but I can tell you, for me, it was a very moving experience, in particular the Apartheid Museum. You just learn so much about the South African culture and history and, what they've had to go through. You've also can see the way that a lot of them live there, and there's some fantastic day tours that you can do in Johannesburg. The resorts are fantastic. Now, we tend to put you in gated communities as well when you're in Johannesburg, so they're very, very safe, and they've got some great restaurants as well. So now you're going to fly home. I'm going to bring you back to Edmonton, but I want to thank you so much for joining me this evening, as I could take you just for half an hour over to South Africa. And please do, if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat box.
Thank you so much, Renee. And I think I probably speak for everybody in terms of some of your photos just took my breath away. So thank you so much for sharing. We do have some questions. One of them is, how early should a safari be booked? Like how many, like years in advance, months in advance? Give us an idea.
Certainly. We typically recommend 12 months in advance, especially if there's a particular lodge you want. Now, obviously, if you can only, let's say you want to leave in 6 months' time, we will certainly do what we can to accommodate, but it might mean you might miss out on the lodge that you're after. So typically 12 months.
12 months. Okay, excellent. There's a question from Amanda that she has a client, obviously she's an agent who has a client who would like to visit Africa for the gaming season. What time of year would you recommend for that?
Well, it's actually all year round. So that's why it really just depends on, so if it's the migration season you're after, it is a phenomenon that's actually all year round. Typically people say it's around the August to October time, but because they move according to where, the grass is and what they can eat, they actually move themselves around Africa in itself. So what we can do is work with you, talk about when your clients are wanting to travel, tell them what countries would be best for that time. And then perhaps if they are wanting to go to somewhere in particular, we can tell you the best time to travel for that.
Okay. Just one thing I do want to mention, and correct me if I'm wrong, is Goway does have planned trips, but you are also customizable. So you can put together an individual trip if people want.
That's exactly right, Lisa. When it comes to organized tours with other people, we typically do them on a much smaller scale. So usually 6 people or so, or 8. So they're more so small group journeys, or otherwise we can completely customize a tour for you.
All right, thank you. There's a question from John. It says, where do trips originate in from North America? I'm not sure, John, what you mean. Are you talking about flights from North America? If you can just clarify that. I mean, Goway can do air from a number of cities in the US and Canada.
That's correct, Lisa. Typically, you'll probably fly more so from Toronto, so you'll get yourself over Toronto. You've got KLM, Air France, Emirates. So all those airlines do fly via a different city. We do have South African Airlines that flies direct out of New York. So you can do a direct flight if you get to New York. I personally opted in for, where did we go? I just have to think about this for a minute. Oh, we took British Airways actually, and we went via London. So my husband and I spent 24 hours in London, and then we flew direct from London down to Cape Town and then Johannesburg back to London.
All right. So yeah, you gave us a small little glimpse of one country, of South Africa, but as you said, there are 24 countries that you take care of. All right. I don't see any more questions in the chat box. So just to let everybody know, travel is definitely starting, and what we've found in the Expedia offices is the demand is there. We've all missed it for so long. So we're planning for longer. I love Edmonton, but I definitely want to get out of Edmonton. And the first opportunity when it's safe to travel is I do want to go somewhere. And I think many, many people do. So Even if you decide you're not traveling now, but you want to travel in 2022, and even we've got some things happening in 2023, it's time to start planning. Reach out to your consultants. If you have any questions, they are here to help you plan a fabulous, fabulous vacation. So thank you for your past vacations. We look forward to planning your next vacation with you. Reminder to follow us on Facebook. Also check out our YouTube channel where this and all of our other video or travel talks are being recorded. Next week, if you're free, please join us. We're going to be coming back to North America and featuring American Steamboat Company. So join us if you can. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your patronage. Have a wonderful evening, and we look forward to seeing you and hearing from you again. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.